Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Obviously, I'm not home. I'm at an undisclosed location. Actually not. Doing something that I can't talk about on here because it's just too public. Not that it's really that top secret, but anyway, so obviously there's a different background. Got a lot of news to talk about, and a lot of it, some of it is focused in a couple of different obvious areas that we've been talking about, war, things like that. But boy, there's just a lot of stuff, and to be honest with you, when I pulled all this together today to talk about this, I had to cut out probably at least 2/3 of it, mostly because it would have been a very, very long video, because there's just so much happening. And like I've said recently, a lot of this stuff is not front page news. It's not trending. It's not getting talked about a lot, but it's very important. And when you put all these pieces together, you start to see a very broad picture of the world that we live in, rapidly changing to a very much a new world order. And then that I don't know any other way to put it. So let's just get on with it, because it's a lot, and we just need to run through it. The first thing that has really caught my eye, and this is one of, again, I know a lot of you are going to say, well, they've been working on this, well, it's this or that. This is a big deal. Regardless of how breaking news this is a big deal. Researchers are now working on developing organoid intelligence. Now, you're familiar with artificial intelligence, which is pretty much a computer that has this learning capability, and eventually to the point that it's able to kind of think on its own. This is different. They are 3D printing human brain cells. They're taking human brain cell cultures, actual human brain cells, not synthetic, the real deal. And they are creating 3D printed cultures of that, with the end goal of creating a super artificial intelligence that is controlled by these people. It's not a human, it's just some type of computer organic brain that is lab created. This, folks, right now, I mean, certainly there's immediate things that we should be focused on and preparing for. But if this continues down this path, I don't know what you folks believe, but man, this is like got beast system written all over it. This is some pretty scary stuff. IRS, this is, just gotta love the Biden administration. The IRS is developing a new Biden-backed algorithm that will ensure that more white people and Asian people get audited by the IRS. So it's equity, not equality, but equity. So in other words, they're gonna make sure that more of them white people, and I guess now Asians are white people. I don't know when that happened, but apparently that's the new thing. Well, they're gonna start getting audited more. So much for bringing the country. Wasn't that one of his things that he talked about right after he got elected? That he was going to be the president that brings the nation together. Well, we're seeing how well that's working out. More on the CBDC front. It's happening. It's happening probably a lot sooner than most people think. Most of the information that's been slipping and out in the news recently indicate that most of these countries that are coming up with a central bank issued digital currency have plans to have it set in place somewhere between April of this year and June of this year. Now, that's not all of them, but a big bulk of them. Sorry, my cameraman is all over the place there. The Bank of England, the deputy governor, has stated that the digital pound would give consumers a safe place to store value. Now, this is not shocking news, but this is something that we've been saying, many folks like myself have been saying for a very long time, that's going to be that's going to be their message. Just last week, the IMF said that it might be necessary for governments to restrict or completely outlaw digital currencies or cryptocurrencies, cryptocurrencies, things like Bitcoin and those different types of cryptocurrencies. So the IMF is saying that, you know, these cryptocurrencies need to be done away with, and the only way to ensure your wealth now, according to the Bank of England, which is definitely a major player in the global financial system, that the only way to ensure your money's security is central bank digital currency. I'm sure you're loving the wind noise in the Again, with Captain Obvious here, something that many people have been saying for the last 3 weeks or so. The Ohio newspaper, one of the Ohio newspapers, is reporting that forestry workers are finding animals are dying at alarming rates in Ohio parks after the train derailment. And the article goes into talking about there have been reports, and they have tested many of these animals already, and some of these tests have come back and have been confirmed that some of the enzymes and materials in like the liver and certain cell structures of the animals are extraordinarily high levels of some of the chemicals at the train derailment. And they're finding large animals like deer, smaller animals, rabbits, mink, all the way down to worms, insects, frogs, things like that. And they're reporting hundreds that they are finding. Talk about food all the time, folks. Need to be stocking up, stack it to the rafters. I don't want to hear any more of like, do I have enough? When is enough to stop buying food? When is enough to stop stocking up? Right now, at this point, how close we are to things happening, I don't think that there is any maximum limit to stocking up. But you also should be producing your own food. You need to be putting out gardens. I know it's still a little early for most of us, but many of us are definitely getting the garden fever. You need to be planning for that, and you should plant as much as possible, produce food, and learn how to preserve it, because it's just getting worse. Another retailer, a grocery store in England, is saying that they are rationing vegetables. They're rationing certain salad and vegetable ingredients. This is a beginning thing that we're seeing, and of course right now it's mostly happening in England, but as we've seen throughout the whole health crisis, it kind of starts there and then works its way overseas to us. Pretty much all of the predictions by all of the experts in the agricultural industry, food industries, financial markets are saying that this year will be way, way worse when it comes to food availability and food prices than last year. And that's not taking into consideration the possibility of some kind of World War III scenario or something even worse than that. So you need to be stocking up on food. Another one of our allies basically bites the dust pretty much, as many of you have been following the recent elections over the last few months in Brazil. Well, Brazil has now allowed 2 Iranian warships to dock in Rio against the pressure and recommendations of the United States. I think many of you, because I've talked to several people, feel that if World War III really gets kicked off, we should really be watching our southern front between Mexico, Argentina, Venezuela, now Brazil. There's a lot of places where folks that want to do harm to the United States can come through to get to us. And so that's another one. This one is a big one. Big news today, and this one right here could cause a reaction very quickly, very soon, maybe days. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that Iran now has enriched uranium to just a hair below what's needed for an atomic grade bomb. Typically, it's needed to be enriched at about 85%, 90% for a bigger, more powerful weapon, but 85% enriched uranium. You should be able to produce an atomic weapon, and right now they're hovering at around 83.7% enrichment, which is far higher than what they had agreed to, 2015 or so. There also in the article it talks about how the stockpiles of uranium is many, many times more than what was originally agreed upon in Iran. So it's definitely, I can't see it any other way. They are working towards a nuclear weapon. Many people, again, believe they probably already have one. Who knows? But Israel has stated very recently, in fact, that they will not allow this to happen and that they will strike very quickly. And so now with this information coming out, it's almost like there's the timer is just ticking away as to when Israel will make their move. Moving on to the European war front, U.S. State Department has said today that it is now clear that China has decided to take a side on the war in Ukraine. This was actually a statement yesterday in the news, and I checked it, and according to the State Department's website, this is exactly what they said. They listed all the things that China has been doing to support Russia, and at the end of the statement, they did say that it is clearly apparent to the United States and the West that China is fully siding and has picked their sides in the war. Army Secretary, this one's a Army Secretary says the goal with China and Taiwan is to avoid a land war. So I guess any other types of wars are okay. We just don't want to get involved in a land war. I think that tells a lot right there. That, you know, as long as it's like a naval and an air war and missiles and all that kind of stuff, you know, maybe that's okay. But a land war is definitely where we don't want to go. And I'm sure on hearing that, China's like, well, let's see what we can do to cause a land war. U.S. Cybersecurity expert with the United States has said that any Chinese invasion of Taiwan will most likely be accompanied by a massive cyber attack against the West. So, and this isn't new news. I mean, I think most of you have already thought that this is what would happen, but most likely at the beginning or just before or maybe slightly after China decides to retake Taiwan, we're probably going to see massive, widespread cyber attacks here in the United States. So again, we need to be preparing for that, which don't have all your eggs in one basket, meaning don't keep everything that's important to you connected to the internet and what's needed to get to stuff, like say your money. If all your money's in the bank and we have a cybersecurity attack, well, it could just disappear. So that's something we should be making plans for. China, I thought this was interesting, and I believe just shows how much closer we are getting to a world war situation. China is purging Western erroneous views from its legal education. This is something that we've seen many times in history when major powers are on the verge of conflict. They do their best to kind of purge that out of their culture. There's video in Ukraine where they have been taking large amounts of any kind of books on Russian literature, Russian history, Russian anything, and they're destroying them, they're burning them, they're shredding them. And of course, Ukraine and Russia, well, they're pretty much close cousins. They're maybe even brothers. They have a lot of shared history. So it just shows how close we're getting to that. And last one, I mentioned this in this morning's video. Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, said this morning that the long-term goal is for Ukraine to be a member of NATO. Now, remember back at the start of this war, even before this war with Ukraine happened, Russia and Ukraine, that was one of the things that Russia said, and they made a claim that why they needed to take care of this problem is because Ukraine was most likely going to become a NATO country. They believed that that could happen. And of course, NATO and the West was just constantly, up until just a few months ago, was saying absolutely not. There's no chance whatsoever that Ukraine could ever be a NATO country. Don't worry about that. Well, now here we are, where everyone's starting to kind of throw this idea of peace around, or this idea of ceasefire, and NATO comes out and says, oh yeah, long-term goal is for Ukraine to be part of NATO. Do you think hearing that Russia is going to, agree to any kind of peace negotiations? Absolutely not. We're just continually poking at the bear further, because I am completely convinced that the West absolutely desperately wants and needs a major war with Russia and China. And so at this point, I don't know that there's too much to stop what's happening and what is yet to come. Bottom line is, folks, I know there's a lot of bad news, a lot of things that just show us how closer we are getting to the time that these things will seriously escalate to where they more directly affect us. We have to keep getting ready for that. We have to keep our preparations, our mental and physical and spiritual preparations, at a pretty escalated level right now. We have to be taking things seriously, looking inward, circling the wagons, figuring out what holes you have in your preps, and getting yourself really psychologically ready for how bad things could really get. It's something we just have to do at this point, because things are moving pretty rapidly. Get your house in order, folks. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.